Hola, muchachos. Today we are going to have a little fun with JavaScript by doing an activity together that will introduce us to the concept of event delegation in JavaScript and how to attach uh, event handlers or event listeners to uh, DOM elements. At the Mozilla Developer Network documentation site, there is a fun article that will introduce us to events in JavaScript. This article is very easy to read. It's not dry like a lot of the documentation that are out there. And it will conceptually introduce you to the various phases of event delegation, like event capture or event bubbling. Event bubbling is the default, but you can specify event capturing inside of your event at event listener, like you see here with the syntax. Okay, I've referenced these two articles for you to read, but I like to do something a little bit practical. So this is going to be our objective for this activity, and we'll do it together. We are going to make, so in the HTML, we have these 5 buttons, and then we have a nested div inside of this ID buttons div here, or div with ID buttons. And here we also have a nested button, and we're going to make these button alert. I know, right? Who uses alert anymore? It's an activity, so I just go with it. But anyway, so we are going to alert the data dash or the data dir value. Keep in mind that this data dash, it could be anything. It could be bacon, okay, or bourbon, or whatever you want to make it to be. But in this case, it's data dash value, and we are going to alert the data value, these guys in here, for each one of these buttons when we click on the button. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to do this 2 ways. We are going to do this the brute force way at first, and then I'm going to show you how to refactor the code to make it a little bit more efficient. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to capture. Now this is going to be the brute force approach, which is less efficient. Okay, and especially when the DOM scales up. Imagine if you have like 1,000 buttons, it won't scale well. So I'll show you the brute force. So let's create a constant for buttons by doing a query selector all. I'm going to select the data dash value inside of all the buttons. Okay, let me read this, make sure I get it right. Okay, all right, so when you do a query select all, it returns a DOM node, right? It returns an iterable node. And because it is an iterable node, again, you can go to the MDN documentation and look up documentation for this. And because it's an iterable node, I can run for each on it, just like if I was running, just like I have data, array data structure in JavaScript, typing and talking at the same time. Okay, for each button. Again, this is inefficient, but I'll demonstrate the brute force. I'm going to essentially attach an event listener to every one of these buttons here, okay? This is why I'm running the for each loop on it. Okay, so if you look at the documentation for add event listener, it will take the type and it's like the listener, which is the callback function, and the third parameter is optional. Okay, by default, it will default to event bubbling, which will bubble out and up, or you have to otherwise you do not want event bubbling. You can use event capture, which is from the top down. Okay, and so the type of event I want is a user click. And then the callback function, I'll just make it an arrow function, and I'll alert button. Now there is a DOM method called get attribute. And get attribute does exactly exactly as described. It gets the attribute of the DOM element, in this case the button, and what attribute do I want? I want the data dash value, okay? So this is one of those things where as a software engineer you have no control over the template, the HTML template. Let's say you're a contractor or whatever, and you have to work with whatever template, HTML template that you're dealing with, or dealt with, as it were. Okay, so now I have attached an event listener to every single one of these buttons. Okay, now let's see if this works. Okay, there it goes, 1. Let's see, 2. Let's go to 3. Let's go to 4. Let's go to 5. And let's do the nested div button in here for the bacon button. Oh, I love bacon. I hope you all love bacon. I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian. Chicharrones is pretty awesome too. Okay, so again, this is the brute force approach, right? And it's very inefficient. When I come back, I'll show you a more efficient way to do this, where we're going to use event delegation, and we can attach an event listener on the current target, okay, on the current target. Here is the JavaScript DOM method get attribute that I used earlier. Here's a documentation on it in case you were interested in reading that in your own time. Okay, so going back to the code, I have commented out the brute force approach, but I've moved it down so it won't distract us from a more efficient solution, but I'll leave this here for your reference in case you were curious on how to do things less efficiently. And so what we are going to do is we are going to attach the event listener to the topmost DOM element. In JavaScript event handling, this is referred to as the current target. So the div with the ID of buttons is, if I attach an event listener to that, it is referred to as the current target. And then subsequently, these buttons down here, if I were to click on them, they will be referred to as the target. I know that sounds kind of unintuitive, but in a computer science-y kind of way, it actually kind of makes sense a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and attach an event listener to this DOM element here. Okay, so let's do another constant here. Let's call it current target div, and document.query selector. Query selector, of course, will take the first specified DOM element, which in this case would be the ID with buttons. This guy's here, obviously. Okay. Okay, now let's go ahead and attach the add event listener to here. Add event listener. I want to click event, and let's do the callback function, and then we are going to pass event as the parameter. Now I don't really need these curly braces, but I'm going to be doing some console logs so that we can better understand what's going on here. So let's see what passing event will give us. Okay, console.log event. Okay, let me click. The console just been gives way too much information, so I'm going to go to this one here. Okay, so if you look at here, let me make this actually even easier to read. And let me clear this out. Let me click on that. Okay, there it is. There's our console log. So event gives us all of these properties. Okay, and you can see, let's look for current target. It's null because I did not click on current target. I clicked on one of the buttons, right? And let's see here. Let's go look at the actual target itself. By the way, look at it also has something called to see current target event face there. And let's look at the target. See what we have. There's target, and it's correctly showing me the button that I clicked on. Okay, and let's see here. Let's scroll down. Let's scroll down. Oh, look at that. See that? It has something called attributes. Okay, remember this button has an attribute data-value that I mentioned earlier. How about that? Well, look at that. The first attribute in here, right? The 0th index, because it's only one attribute in here. Data-value. Wow, look at that. Data-value. We can actually access this. And then underneath that, it has something called value, right? Which has the value here. How about that? Okay, so now our job is pretty easy, right? We don't have to attach, we don't have to loop through all of the button to alert the value. So all we have to do is alert event dash target. Okay, event again, event target. Let me go up here, right there. Okay, event dot target. All right, target, and then we're gonna go to attributes. Okay, attributes, target, attributes. Where's attribute? Bam, right there, attribute. And then we want the 0th index, right? The first one, which is the 0th one, because again, there's only one attribute here, right? Data, unless I add something else to this, right? I add data dash bourbon. Okay, I'm not trying to promote alcoholism, but bourbon is delicious. Anyhow, so, and then if you look again in the attributes, that value, you just go down, we have something called value. Okay, and let's change value onto there. Okay, and then let's click. Let me close this out so you can see better. Bam. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and bacon. Okay, it's easy as that. Okay, so this is a more elegant solution to how I had it before, the brute force approach. Okay, for those who have already subscribed to my channel, thank you very much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, and it'll help me grow the channel. Okay, thank you for watching. Gracias por ver. Hasta luego.